Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. It's Chad Hyams here. Bob Stewart there. Bob, before we get going, put that pen down.
I don't know if I can. Can I ask you a question? You guys are both. Yeah. Oh, so we have a guest today. We'll bring him on in just a minute. But you guys are both in Florida. Like, are you guys in the hurricane's path? And this is, I'm cueing the audience in now to when we're recording this because they don't tend to drop for a while. But like, are you guys safe? Are both of you guys safe?
Mark, where are you located?
I'm in Jacksonville, so I'm in Northeast Florida. It's
so you might get a little bit of this.
Get the tail end of the rain.
And a little bit of rain, but that's it so far. Just outer bands, I guess.
Yeah, where are you at? This isn't going to be like
end of Florida.
Okay,
Bob, I'm down here in Fort Lauderdale, so it's going to kind of go right between Mark and I as it comes across from Tampa. They're the evacuation city.
Crazy.
My partner is in Ocala, so they may get a little bit more of it there in the Ocala area.
There you go. So prayers sent out to everybody.
Obviously this will air long after that. Hopefully we're not cleaning up still when this thing comes out. But man, big one coming.
Yes, hopefully we have.
And there's another one coming right behind it too.
Oh my goodness, 3 in a row.
Nadine is coming right behind it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right.
Season, Bob.
It is hurricane season. Chad, I don't know if I've ever told you my story. My wife, the reason I married my wife is because her and I got trapped in a hurricane in Cabo, Hurricane Odile. And I saw a side of my wife I didn't know that was like, I'm like, oh, she means business. This is somebody I could partner with for the rest of my life. Like, holy cow. So anyway.
And Bob, I think I've told the story as well. If Nita knew me during my hurricane experience, she would have said, that guy's an idiot. There is no way I'm spending my life with him. As I was working on cruise ships and went out onto the deck to see what this hurricane thing was all about. And I will tell you, 100+ mile per hour winds is no joke when you attempt to stand still. I was running and going backwards at the same time. So
Mark, that's what happens when you're raised in Toronto, Canada. You don't like some of the. Is that even like Canadian? Is hurricane a Canadian word, or do you guys know that word up there?
They know the word up there. What we deal with are called blizzards. And no, never had a snow day in my life for all these people canceling school just because it looks like
snow. All right,
snow.
enough about this. We have a guest.
Let's get to it, Bob. I'm just challenging you before we begin. Keep that pen nearby. I have this feeling Mark's going to give us some amazing notes, yet don't hold it because the audience and Dave do not want to listen to the clickety click, click, click that you like to do so much.
But I do take notes. I always take notes. The audience knows this. My mom and your mom are our audience, by the way, Mark. That's all that listens to our podcast. They've listened a couple million times, so we have a few million downloads, but
Mom and your mom are both very busy re-listening. We've brought him on. You've already heard his voice. I've already mentioned his name. Let's bring Mark to the conversation. Mark, welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast.
Thank you, guys. You guys cut up, man. Y'all were fun.
We do our best to not make this the same old podcast. Folks, if you're listening to the same old podcast, you're listening to the wrong thing. So, folks, go grab your friends who are listening to the boring podcast. Bring them over here. We're going to bring you value and fun. What we hear most from our interviewed guests is that was the most fun podcast I've been on in a while, and yet they're still bringing amazing value. So bring your friends to the party.
Awesome,
our audience might not know you, and I don't read bios. Introduce yourself to the audience as you want them to know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Mark Scherer. I'm the CEO and founder of Encompass Life. I developed a technique for coaching. It's called the Quantum Leap Technique, and Bob was talking about this show in the 80s. It's not related to the show in the 80s.
Wait, so your technique does not change me into somebody else and throw me back into the 50s? Okay, Roger.
No. And I have no resemblance to Scott Bakula. He has hair, and I'm more like Chad over here.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. He fits right in. So, Mark, let's get right to that then. I mean, I want to hear all this stuff, and let's dive into this quantum leap technique that you have. Talk about what that is. What is QLT?
Yeah, so it's a way to produce breakthrough results in a matter of seconds. Most people, they may have a great idea to start a business or to move forward in life. They have an idea, but they get stuck up in the how. How am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? And that monkey mindset of how will wear people out. It's also a way of increasing emotional intelligence. And what I mean by how we measure emotional intelligence here is a measurement from when somebody will go into a state of reactivity. In other words, maybe shut down or lash out, or let me think about it for a couple of days, weeks, or whatever, and I'll get back to you. Whatever that delay is from when that person um, goes into that reactivity to be able to come back with an effective action conversation is a measure of what we call emotional intelligence here.
Yeah, I
So,
got a question on that before you go any farther, because that was really interesting. But it almost seems like there's got to be a middle of a spectrum, right? Because the person who lashes out or snaps like this is probably going to be a low emotional intelligence score in that situation. But the person who tells me I'll get back to you and comes back to me a month later, finally, I can't imagine that that's good. Talk a little bit
right.
about that.
Yeah, so it's the same thing, but those two reactivities are basically based on childhood situations. So they could have had a parent who got really upset with them or yelled at them or something, and instead of them lashing out at their dad or mom, they went into a state of reclusiveness and just shut down and withdrew. So if you're going to be a leader, withdrawing sucks, right? If you're going to lead your team, you got to be on the point, be able to respond to the situations quickly. Barbara, I choose to remember her last name on Shark Tank, Cochran or something like that.
Cochran.
Thank you, Cochran. I saw an interview with her, and she was talking about how her company became successful. She started a company with $1,000 investment and turned it into $1.5 billion real estate company. And she was talking about what made her company successful. And she goes, "We don't have the best agents. We don't have the best leads. We don't have any of that. But we have one thing that all of our agents have in common, and it's what has created our success." And she goes, "The real estate market, we win some and you lose some, right?" She goes, "Our people all have the capacity or all have the habitual pattern to, if something happens, they immediately get back up and get in the game. So there's no licking the wounds. There's no, let me think about it for a week. There's none of that. It's an immediate back end response again, or lashing out or blaming somebody else." So same thing for leadership and this emotional intelligence piece. If you go into a state of shutdown, that creates uncertainty and doubt in your company. If you go into a state of reactive response, where they lash out, I mean, you're going to have a high turnover, especially in companies starting up. I mean, and really any companies. Um, there's a high percentage it's a high cost to retrain somebody. In a small companies, you're a small businessman. That stuff will kill you. High turnover will kill a small company very, very quickly. The clients don't trust it, and people surely don't trust coming to work there.
Okay, is there a happy medium then? I mean, how do we find that happy medium between lash out and leave uncertainty in people's minds?
Yeah, so you have to remove those triggers, and um, with
Well,
this,
then I'll
with,
delete Bob from this podcast right now.
Chad.
oh, how about we just fix you real quick?
Okay, I'll take it.
Please fix him. Oh my God, you can fix
I'm kidding.
Chad?
I'm
Like,
kidding. I'm
we would have
kidding.
booked you on the second episode of this podcast. We've done like hundreds.
Oh, I'm kidding. No, so most modalities talk about you got to think positive thoughts and don't think negative thoughts. I'm sure you've heard of that. Yes.
Of
So I've,
course.
I've studied consciousness for 35 years. I've had numerous companies, and one of the things that's always been I've always done, no matter what company I was in, I was always looking to study consciousness and better myself as a leader. And the positive and negative thing, when I started working with that, it was like now there's one more voice in my head trying to manage the other voices to judge which one's positive and which one's negative and how to do that. So it didn't really work for me. It just gave me something more clutter up there. So about 15 years ago, I had a pretty tough time in my life where I kind of hit rock bottom and got into an accident. Got where I couldn't walk. I had an embezzlement in my company, and I lost 95% of my wealth in 120 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I've been studying consciousness, and I was having successes and failures, and ups and downs, and I said, man, there's got to be another way. And when I started doing that, I worked with met a guy who somebody had been telling me about for a long time, and I studied with him for about 8 or 9 years, and while doing other businesses as well. And this may sound weird, but all his stuff was based on feeling, like really heavy duty on the feeling world. Everything else I'd been doing previous to that point was based on mental and trying to manage my thoughts. So when I started working with the feeling side, I began to realize thoughts were a function of body chemistry. So, in other words, like if we break out a bottle of tequila here, each have a couple of shots, we're going to have a whole different party here, right?
Sure.
So you change body chemistry, you change brain chemistry, and thoughts change. So I said, there's got to. So I started playing with this, and what we're doing in the quantum leap technique is rather than going straight into the emotional component, we work with the body first to have the body go into a state of parasympathetic. Once the body goes into a state of parasympathetic, the emotional body goes with it, and the person has a new set of thoughts. Pretty simple. Way, way easier than herding cats by trying to manage the thoughts. So most people, like they have a lot of wants in their life, and they try to, and they may be manifesting their wants, but the word want has a meaning of the word want is a desire without ever having. So with somebody's manifesting from a state of want, there's a level of frustration in that feeling world. So when they get their manifestation, they will go like, "Why did I ask for more? This didn't really fulfill me." And they just keep chasing. Looks like the donkey with the carrot in front of it. They're never really fulfilled. Making sense?
Yeah, they want the promotion, they want the higher salary, they want the bigger car, but none of those things make them feel any different than they felt
No.
coming in.
Yeah, and they're still not fulfilled. And they're trying to do everything based on an external source rather than on the internal. So the quantum leap technique is giving you the feeling of having already having something great. Like really give yourself this feeling, even without before you ever even try to figure out what it is. Don't try to. I call it conjure. Like most people visualize, and I call that process conjuring something. And many people are great at conjuring. But if you could give yourself the feeling of something with no mental construction, you go with from a state of already fulfilled. It's like getting 40 hours worth of Netflix downloaded in 2 seconds. And all of a sudden, instead of trying to visualize something, you get to see a movie of where your life's headed at that particular feeling and frequency.
Fascinating.
So all we're doing is changing the channel to have a new set of thoughts arrive. And feelings have give you access to memories. Give you an example. So Bob was talking about he met his wife on at a hurricane, and he met her, and it was like, oh my God, the feelings went off, and he was going into deep description of what it was like to meet her and how he knew how special she was. I bet you could recall what she was wearing, the smile on her face, and everything, because the feelings are giving him access to this beautiful memory of his meeting his wife. So if and when we can produce a brand new feeling in our body, and feelings give us access to memories, if it's a brand new feeling and we're still getting access to memory, where and when is the memory coming from our future?
Wow. Because we could,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I thought I was getting like you guys must have smoked some weed.
Well, it's I don't know if I've ever. We've done a lot of these podcasts. We've talked to a lot of people, Chad. I don't know that I've ever heard it. I mean, obviously, this is like new technique or something. Okay, so how do I manifest a feeling that I might not have the memories to even conjure up? Like if I've never, felt great bliss, for example, like how do I then get into that zone to then allow myself to build the memories that create bliss?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So notice how he's in the state of how. Now remember that's the monkey mindset that keeps people stuck.
Okay.
Yep.
So you just go, oh wow. one of the classes we do is called From How to Wow. And that's where people get their emotional intelligence goes up and they get the basics of being able to do what we're doing here. So instead of saying how, Bob, just say, oh, wow. No, you got to come on, Bob. You got to work.
Oh, wow.
I want you to
I mean,
participate, Bob.
I said it earlier, like, oh, wow. I think I said
you
incredible or
got to
something.
slow down. You got to slow down and give yourself the feeling of your words come out. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Now that I already did it. Now that I already did it. And don't try to figure it out. Just give yourself have it land in your body. You know, put your feet up on the desk, lean back. Oh, wow.
Wow.
And you give the he's getting good at putting his feet up
He's
on the
doing
desk.
it. He's really good at putting his feet up on the desk and relaxing. He's good at that.
And so you have your body go into a state of relaxation. The deeper the state of relaxation the body can get into, the more creative the mind becomes. When the person is in sympathetic fight or flight, the creativity and all that is shut off, limited. Everything comes from a place of ease, or in other words, you're already becoming one with this thing that you have even yet to identify before you've identified it.
You know, Bob, I'm hearing what Mark's sharing with us, and the image I'm having is Ben for all those years, right? He always knew that he would build the company that he built. He didn't necessarily know all the details. He knew some of the pieces of it and all that, but he absolutely had that, oh, wow. And it's not like he came from some experience, as we know his story of, well, his dad ran a big business like that, so he knew what it looked like or anything like that, or people in his world did. Yet Ben's had that, oh, wow, which has helped him create, which has now become what we've actually seen as it's come
funny,
to life.
Chad. I'm thinking back. I tell this story all the time of like the first time when he was recruiting me to come, be a part of this thing we're building. I remember him flipping the whiteboard over in the back of it, in his house, and it had the drawing, the map of what we were going to build. And later, a couple years later, he would flip it over for place, right? And Goldman believed in that vision to a pretty good degree. I had like, oh, wow moments in both of those scenarios. And we hadn't built a big company before. We hadn't had 1,000 employees before. We hadn't had these things, but man, Mark, like in that moment when he flipped it over and I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, but wow. And I kind of like just submitted to the idea that like, yeah, we can do this. Like ever since that like literally since that moment, like I'm on a mission to go do this for our team. And again, like on day one, when he flipped over, we didn't have any idea how we were going to bring that thing to life. We didn't have the experience to do it. We didn't have the people to do it. We didn't have the resources that day to do it. But there was this
you had
like,
the wow.
Yeah, there was a wow.
You had the
and there
wow.
was like a, man, almost like and I think in that moment, it was maybe my belief in Ben, the belief in some of the skills that we had built up, even though we hadn't built what we needed to get to where we were going. But yeah, there was this wow moment.
Yep.
That almost like set, and then the foundation for how we were going to do it, like kind of became the vision in the future. Oh my goodness, this is insane.
Yeah. And what we're doing here is having where people can just live in it. So instead of it happening sporadically or by happen chance, you can just live in it. So no matter what the situation comes up, the person stays in parasympathetic.
Can you define that word for me? I wrote that word down. Like what?
Yeah. So there's the nervous system is either sympathetic or parasympathetic. Sympathetic is a fight or flight response, and you're basically running a reptilian brain system. So when somebody goes into parasympathetic, the nervous system calms down, and the person has higher brain function available to them.
Okay.
Now, this higher brain function piece, like whatever the state of ease, is not static. It's a continual expanding state of ease. And what's having it expand is greater levels of trust and competency with this wonderful gift of co-creation we have. Most people call it the law of attraction. We call it the gift of co-creation here. And if you say the law and you say the gift, you can feel the difference in your body. One feels a little more antagonistic and one feels, ease. So every word will either add ease to your system or add tension to your system. So there's a whole language of operating in this way.
I love that word change right there, right? Taking out of the law of attraction, which we've heard for so many years, John Maxwell, right? I mean, so it's a phrase many know, especially in our industry, our world. And I love that you're doing the parasympathetic and sympathetic. That's such a term in the health world, Bob. I'm not going to turn this to a health podcast, right?
Yeah.
But it's the two states that our body is in when it's repairing or when it's working, right? And it's getting yourself to that parasympathetic state, which is where your body is able to do the repair that we hear about. That's why when we sleep, that's where this HRV term it comes from. So while it's the difference in your heartbeat, because your heart doesn't actually just beat steady, there's variables between the beats. It'll go beat, 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 right? And that's your parasympathetic and your sympathetic system fighting back and forth for control of your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how you've taken it, Mark, and brought it out of where I've always heard it, which is in the health world that I strongly follow, and brought it into just the creation world of how our bodies and our minds work.
And all sympathetic nervous system issues, or the fight between parasympathetic and sympathetic, is the battle between right and wrong going on in the person's intellect, trying to judge things right or wrong, good or bad.
I saw. I was definitely like, and I could probably, I don't know if this is it. I could pinpoint back almost to like why but for years, and I still battle with this, struggle with it with my wife, my kids. I'm a right or wrong. Like, I want to be right. And I realized this in many cases, the stupidity of it. I saw something, I was doing a little research, Mark, on your website about that whole, like that idea of right or wrong. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit deeper? Because you just brought it up.
Yeah. This can get weird, maybe a little weird real quick.
Okay.
But anybody ever heard the story of Adam and Eve?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, and they believed they became separate from God. So I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever been somewhere where life isn't?
I don't think so.
I don't even know how to answer that. I would have to say no. I mean, life's everywhere around us, right?
Right. Most people will have to ponder that question, and they think about it. I mean, it's so simple. But I have people will sit there. Well, let me think about it. Well, I don't know. I went to the desert one time. I go, were you in the desert? They go, yeah. Were you alive? Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah. So everything we do here is scripturally based, not religion, but scripturally based. And to me, scriptures and quantum physics is the same thing. The technique we're using here, called the quantum leap technique, is spoken about in scriptures. Christ gave thanks for the miracles he had not yet performed, for he knew they would be there. I remember reading that. I'm other than religious.
That's what it was. That's what I read about you, is that you used to you read the Bible to like prove your parents wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a stubborn little shit.
Me too.
And pretty much whatever I read, I remember. So I could quote things, and I mean, I just had that ability. So there's no way we can become separate from God. Never have been, never will be. So we don't have to do something right in order to get back to something that we've always been one with. So all pain and suffering, all the insanity that's going on in the world today, comes from the belief or the feeling of being separate. And once we have that feeling of being separate, it produces this chemical cocktail that whacks the brain out. So you can stay, and there's a language of separation and there's a language of unity. The word not, there's a direct correlation between the word not and anxiety. The higher the percentage of knots a person speaks in their life, the higher that person's level of anxiety they have. Period. Guarantee you. Also, it's the sign of suppressed anger and resentment. I don't like that. I don't want this. So,
you're gonna have me,
Bob, ask me where I'm going today.
Where are you going,
Mark? Where are you going today?
Where are you heading today?
Not Houston. Did I answer your question?
No.
No, I lied by omission. I gave you the finger.
Yeah.
So when somebody's doing that, they're broadcasting this finger and the universe is responding to the finger, is mirroring it back to them. And it shows up in their relationships, shows up in their bank account, shows up in their health somehow or another, because that's the energy they're putting out. That's the energy they're getting back. So we have a way of having those people change their energy very quickly. And as they do so, all areas of their life change simultaneously and exponentially. And I can get you hundreds of people who are doing this, and it's working. Where they come to us with a health issue, the relationships improve, their money issues improve. All of that happens at the same time. So it's like one-stop coaching.
I mean, it's kind of centered in this idea of wow, this idea of like replacing all that language.
So the idea of wow is enthusiasm, not excitement. Excitement is when somebody gets a result. They choose to make a result of maybe getting the yellow sports car and the blonde with a certain cup size or something, right? And then they get it and they go, why did I ask for something different, right? That's excitement. It's all based on the exterior. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, meaning with God, or meaning with love, or meaning with truth, or meaning with life. So when somebody's doing it with enthusiasm, it's all an inside job. And yes, people are still producing results at a really remarkable pace, but their happiness comes from the competency with the tool of co-creation rather than an external result.
I love when we get into some of these conversations, right, Bob? Sometimes we're sitting here and we're interviewing our guests, and they have value and they're sharing something, and we're like, yep. And then sometimes we get a guest like Mark here, where I can just see your face, my face, and we're just sitting here going, yeah, if it weren't for the fact that we're on a podcast and we need to keep talking, I want to stop and ponder this for a moment. Time out, right? Audience, go away for a minute. We need 5 minutes of silence to just kind of absorb this. Mark, thank you for bringing such stuff. I have more I want to get to with you. Before we do, you mentioned you've got a book coming out about first quarter of 25.
Yes, sir.
We don't know when Dave drops these episodes, so the book might be out, but I believe we're going to beat that with this episode. Talk a little bit about, is it about this stuff we've been talking about already, and how do they keep an eye out for it? What's the best way for them
I'm getting all that put into place now, but it's a book I've been working on for about a year. It's going through first draft editing now. So, but if you'd like to hear more about this, go to our website, encompasslife.com, and we do online classes. We have recorded classes. I started coaching while I was doing other companies. I have clients all over the world. I didn't even have a website. People were coming to me because somebody else had made a change in their life, and they was like, "Hey, you worked with so and so, and here's what happened. Can you work with me?" Kind of deal. So I got clients all over the world. And I started Encompass Life about 6 years ago. My clients were asking, where do we learn what you're doing? And I said, well, there's no one doing what I'm doing as far as I can tell. So I started a university to train people who could train other people. And now we're launching in a big way. And you'll check out the basics. Check out our From How to Wow class. We're going to be in
Pierre, North South Dakota, Jacksonville, Minneapolis. I'm on the website right now. Midland, Texas.
Bob's the hype man.
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, Costa Rica. We'll be in Costa Rica in April.
Well, that one. There you go. We'll go to that one. That one sounds fun. So the website, again, give it to everyone so they can track and see. And then I want to get back to some questions I have for you.
Yeah, it's www.encompasslife.com.
Perfect. All right, encompasslife.com. Folks,
shoot me an email at mark@encompasslife and mention Chad and Bob, and so I know where you came from, and I'm happy to look forward to speaking with you. It's really fascinating how fast this stuff works, and it works with health and all that as well.
Love it. Okay, I have two questions that I think our audience will benefit from. I'm just going to throw the signals up in the air, right? That we don't want to go as deep as maybe we did on this first topic, because then it's going to turn into 5 different podcasts in our series, because you have so much value. We have a crap load of entrepreneurs as our audience, right? Our audience is strongly entrepreneurial. And then, of course, there's Bob's mom and my mom, who, again, kind of fit in that category, but they're really the other part of our audience. How do you replace yourself? Right? It's a challenge. One of the two challenges I want to ask is, how do you replace yourself? Because we never think anybody can do it as well as we can. And question number two, how do I find, I don't want to say balance doesn't exist, but how do I deal with the toll maybe my family is feeling because of all the work I'm putting in, time, commitment, stress, and effort there?
Yep. So it goes
Whichever
back
one
to
you
the
want to attack first.
Yeah, it goes back to the same thing. Rather than like, how am I going to replace myself, right? So if you got that how, good luck, because that's that fight or flight reptilian brain system. Good luck with that. So
Okay.
once again, and I'll share from my own experience. When I was starting up my company, I was running on a really tight budget to do it. I told you I'd had a embezzlement and lost like 95% of my wealth a number of years ago. So I'm starting this company up, and I'm running really tight, and I'm coaching, and I was stressed out. I had access to this information to some degree, and one of my clients said, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting a personal assistant?" I'm like, I can't do that. Can't afford that. I had a whole bunch of knots associated with it, and I went, "There's those little sneaky little things again. There's those knots." I said, "Okay." Sat down, put my feet up on my desk, and I gave myself the feeling of having my perfect personal assistant. This is wild. The next call I'm doing was with a client, working with her, and about halfway through our call, she goes, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting a personal assistant?" And she goes, "You know what I've done in my previous life?" I said, "No, what did you do?" She goes, "I was executive assistant at Google. I made $120 an hour." And I was like, "Well, I can't afford that." And she goes, "I would work way less for you, and we could do some trade on some classes or coaching." And I wrote down a number on a piece of paper. I'd written down everything I desired in this person. And I wrote down a number, which was $30 an hour. She came up with the exact same number. And my list of what I wrote down, she came out with even greater levels. So it's as weird as that sounds, it's a belief system of not being the person feels they can't be supported. We have a diagnostic tool here that we can help find those limiting patterns. If a person believes they can't be supported, what will happen is they'll hire people who can't support them, or they'll hire people who can, and they'll belittle them until they won't.
Mark, I have young kids. I have a 7 and an 8-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I really fundamentally believe that if you think you can't, you won't. You know what I'm like? That's essentially what you just described there. You're like, I was nodding myself. I was like, if you don't think it's possible, like it's never going to happen, right? Part of that wow to me sounds like what it's almost like yes,
It's
it's
already
possible.
done.
It's
Already
already done. I
done.
mean, that's
Already
next
done.
step of it, right? Is once you decide in your head that you're going to do it, it's done. I mean, that's next level, and that's essentially where you're trying to bring somebody to, right?
Yeah, and the body has to reflect it. That's the key. It has to be in the body. If it's just up here, you're going to be a lot of efforting.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, right, again, audience, Bob and I wish we could take like 5 minutes. I think and be thinking and contemplating a little. I want to keep this going for you. It makes me think of the meeting my wife, because I did that exact thing, just not that way. Right. I didn't sit back in my chair, put my feet up and go, oh, wow. Right. I was actually challenged to describe my future wife in my life. And I sat down and I said, okay, who is she? And I wrote down all these things about her. And within 2 weeks, I had met my now bride of 13 years that hit 95% of the things on my list. I wowed her into existence of my world without even knowing this method. I used a different
Yep.
method, but really it's the exact same method.
Yep. Everyone has done it to some level with their successes, but most people think it's happening by happen chance or whatever. What we're doing here is that we have a systematized way for a person to live in it. And it's some simple steps instead of getting rattled, the person can immediately have this new behavior come in line because the subconscious is already programmed to trust it.
Loving this. All right. My other question to you, and folks, go back, listen to that last 5 minutes again. If you're the one out there going, I need an admin, but I just can't, right? There's your not in there. Go back. And for those of you who are saying, wait, he didn't say not. Can't is cannot, right? Don't is do not, right? The not is there for those of you who are like, wait, he's not saying not. It's called the contraction.
Or unworthy or unavailable. Anything that's canceling that word out. Even this, the dis, dis, any of those is all the same.
Okay. Remember that the dis, the un, and the not. All right. What about the toll that it takes on our families? A lot of us entrepreneurs listening here have built big businesses or are building big businesses. Entrepreneurs usually put in those extra hours. They put in their blood, sweat, tears into what they're working on. It does take a toll on families for those that have it. What are some of those unique ways that we can address that and help move forward from that? Let's close it out with talking about that.
Get your family involved.
Tell me more.
Get your family involved in what you're doing and what you're building. Plan. Say, hey, I have this going on here, and here's what we're going to be do. Give them what do you call it? Cherries, like little rewards. Hey, I'm doing this. There's time away, and we're going to have quality time. It's not how much time you spend with somebody. It's the quality of the time you have with them. The greatest gift you can give somebody is not present with present. It's presence with ENSC, whatever. PRESENC.
Yep, I got you.
Okay, we can't spell either.
Yep. But you're there.
So
you're there.
Your presence is what's the greatest. My grandfather was he was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was like he's saying something different. And he spoke in ways that I got life lessons from him. And I was like, something's different about this guy. And everybody in the family, they would call him, and he would, sit there, and something would fall out of his mouth. They'd go, oh, he's got something going on. So maybe I got some of this from my grandfather. If I did, thank you so much, Grandpa.
Love that.
All right, folks, the website, it's encompasslife.com. You can get Mark right there, mark@encompasslife.com. If you want to shoot him an email, tell him you're a listener of Win, Make, Give. Connect with Mark that way. And of course, keep checking out the website for all the things he's got and the book coming. Mark, last thought. I'm going to throw this one at you. I'm going to put you on the spot. You might want to repeat something you've said. You might want to say something brand spanking new that did not even come up in our conversation today. What are you called to share with our audience as the final thought of today's call?
Yeah, instead of speaking your nots, replace them and start speaking only what you love. Even though you may not even have it yet. I really love having ease in my company. I really love having peace in my family. I really just start speaking what you love and watch what happens.
Chad, I really love managing my calendar and never leaving Chad Hyams here for another interview by himself.
I love you for that, Bob Stewart. And folks, we love all of you listening to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Somebody needs to hear this one, right? There's somebody out there who's saying not, un, and dis way too often. Let Mark be the guy who teaches them the value of changing what they're saying.
I don't know how many of these you've listened to, maybe none. I will tell you, Chad and I are very rarely both caught with our mouth slightly agape at the same time. So this was really, really good stuff today, man. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I love you guys' energy.
All right, until our next
couple.
Until our next episode, folks. Do good.